Guys, is the bear market here? The market's been crashing. Bitcoin went under 100,000, Solana under 150, and yes, Kaspa under 5 cents. Why is this crash happening, and what does it correlate to? We're going to get into all of that, and at the end, we're going to dive into some bullish catalysts that are coming up for the overall crypto market in the next 3, 6, 12 months. As always, now this is ever financial advice. Cryptocurrency is extremely risky, and always do your own research. There may be affiliate links down below that I receive a commission with. And now let's get into the market crashing. October and November were rough for markets, but just something that I want to put in everyone's brain, just a little bit of food for thought. Bitcoin is up a 706% the last 1100 days. Does that look like a bull market waiting to start, or does that look like a bull market that is already complete? I'll let you know my take at the end. Currently looking, and this is probably about 12 hours before you're watching the video, we're looking at a little bit over 100K BTC. It had wicks down to 98.9. I'm going to dive into this deeper. Looking at CAS, down, down, down. Very, very painful, guys. But Kaspa down under 5 cents, guys. Down, down, down. But I believe in it. And just one little positive thing I'll say about Kaspa is the nodes are getting more and more. People are adding nodes, securing the network. I'm absolutely bullish on that. So all of this, the fundamentals of Kaspa, the community is very strong. Whenever you look at the network, it's strong, 600 petahashes. So Kaspa, the price is going down, but I am still extremely bullish on the network. Never financial advice, guys. And I know this time is hard. If anyone wants to join the private Discord, guys, we got over 100 great investors over there. Use code KASPA70 for 70% off forever. It comes out to less than $1 a day. It's very important to be with like-minded investors during this downturn and be able to see what people think, see what I think, and just have someone to bounce ideas off of along the way. But one of the reasons why there is a lot of issues with everything right now, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and there is also less liquidity is due to the government shutdown, officially the largest shutdown in the United States of America government history. 34 days, and that is true to my knowledge that we have now, or we are about to be, the largest or longest shutdown. That is a very big thing for liquidity, and especially whenever we look at the markets primarily face the United States, right? If the United States isn't doing good, global markets don't do good. And when we take a look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is something that thrives off of liquidity, right? This is a speculative asset. This is, whether you consider it a commodity or what, it is something that relies on fresh liquidity coming in at all times to not only go up, but also to, maintain the value with selling pressure or anything like that. And so we definitely got the government shutdown, but then a little bit closer into crypto, we have a little bit of FUD around the liquidation of it. Massive rumors around Wintermute. And if you don't know who Wintermute is, it's the #1 market maker. That's who makes sure that if you go to sell something, they're there to buy. If someone else goes to buy, then they're there to sell it to them. This is what makes the market. You have market makers in the stocks, you have market makers in crypto, but there's less regulatory on the crypto side of things, and then it can get a little shaky, like the big liquidation event that we've seen. But people are claiming that Wintermute, one of crypto's largest market makers, is preparing to go after Binance. Binance, the largest exchange, after the automatic stop losses that they had, the liquidation protections that they had. So basically what happened is a lot of people got forced liquidated in this October crash. You can see over 19 billion liquidated in 24 hours, the biggest single day liquidation in crypto history, guys. So we obviously have that going on. We have the government shutdown, and we still have looming tariff news, big fiscal things that will change the way everything operates. And whenever we come over here, one thing that put a big pause on the entire markets, if you look at bonds and stocks, is that at the end of the last Fed meeting, Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, said that it is not a foregone conclusion that there will be a rate cut in December. And so now you could see where it went from about 90% that there would be a rate cut. Last week it fell to 66.8 and now 69. So it's starting to creep up a little bit. But that is all off of the comment that the Federal Reserve said. But they also mentioned that starting in December, they are going to stop quantitative tightening. They're going to stop sucking that liquidity out of the marketplace. And soon after, quantitative easing will start. And that's where I want to segue to a post that I seen over on X by Ralph Paul, guys, very well known in the crypto sector. And you can read over here on the right the text. This is the image right here. But he's talking about global liquidity. And as I said, the Federal Reserve has been doing quantitative tightening. They've been doing this ever since interest rates had been cut down to zero. And then when they started raising them, QT began. And you could see the only game in town is rolling 10 trillion in debt. Everything else is a slideshow. This is the game of the next 12 months. And you start talking about the government shutdown has forced a sharp tightening of liquidity as TGA builds up with nowhere to spend it. This is not offset by the ability to drain, and QT drains it further. So not only are we in the government shutdown where liquidity is kind of frozen or not there, but we're also in a quantitative tightening environment. You can see how high we got up here during 2021 and 2022, but now we have hit these lows. We have hit these lows down here, and it's not relative in terms of value, but it is relative in terms of the trend line that you can see we haven't hit these lows since right after 2008, right after the housing crisis. He goes on to say, as soon as the government shutdown ends, the Treasury begins spending 250 bill to 350 bill in a couple of months. QT ends in the balance sheet technically expands. And this is what I want to go into now. I want to take a look at the Fed's balance sheet and show you where it has been and where it could potentially go in the next couple of months. I went over this in one of the market briefs that I had, the private Discord on this Sunday, about the overall Fed balance sheet. Okay, if you're looking for the ticker for this, it is USCBBS over on TradingView. But you could see what has happened. Basically, if we kind of go back all time, you could see 2008, which is when there was the housing crisis. And you can see this point right here was way back here, this low that I talked about. So we haven't been to this low amount relative of global liquidity since this point right here, where the Fed's balance sheet was under $1 trillion. And you see they had to almost triple it to save the housing market. But ever since what we had a couple years ago going on, you could see it went from 3.75 and the Fed increased it 138%. But then quantitative tightening began. And you see, if we lower this to right here, it's been a 26% drop in the Fed's balance sheet. This is absolutely huge. And what the Fed said is that they're going to stop QT right here. Okay, I think it actually comes down to December 3rd, but they're going to stop QT here. And then when certain other things expire, I believe a lot of them being mortgage-backed securities expire, then they're going to start putting that money into treasuries. And what that's going to do, the more people buying treasuries, it's going to make the interest rate go down on top of with the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. And that's why I'm not freaking out too much about the Fed saying that it's not a foregone conclusion that there will be a December rate cut. I personally, never financial advice, think that there will be a December rate cut. But you could see when taking a look at the overall liquidity that if the Fed stops QT and begins QE, that's essentially a couple rate cuts probably, because as there's demand for treasuries, the overall interest rate they have to offer goes down, and those are the interest rates that will affect mortgages and any type of consumer borrowing. But even just the fact that they're not taking anything else out of it, is a very big sign. But I really think Raul had a lot of very good points. He then starts talking about some of the regulatory stuff. The Clarity Act will get passed, giving crypto the regulation so desperately needed for large scale adoption, banks, asset managers, and business. And this Clarity Act is the next rev to overall crypto regulation. We know that they recently passed the Genius Act, which had to do to stable coins, but now the Clarity Act, I truly think, will allow things like real world assets and tokenization of everything between the stocks to actual mortgages or deeds for a home or even social security and driver's license. I think everything is going to be on chain via an NFT and not the JPEGs that everybody was all obsessed with a couple years ago. But I think this Clarity Act is going to be the open ticket for Wall Street and everyone else to fully start actually tokenizing things. But I know it's been rough. Okay. I finally reached shark status on Kaspa just to see my bag go down, down, down. But it's something that I'm not losing conviction in. Everybody's in different personal positions. But for me right now, what I am doing is trading safely and trying to protect the capital that I've worked so hard for until we get a better environment. But I think that it could be coming fairly soon because, like I said, we have all this bullish macro things going on. And then if you're bullish on Bitcoin, if you're bullish on the cycle, then we need to come over here and take a look at this because this trend line right here that I have is touching a lot of points. So if we come over here and take a look, it touched down here a couple times at the start. This was 16K BTC. That's what I mean. A lot of people are waiting on the bull run, but they missed like a 6-7x on BTC. Think about that. Just think about that. But whenever we come over here and take a look, we bounced off it here, bounced off it here. We came down to it here, but we didn't touch it. We came down to it here, and we didn't touch this line. But if I bring these up right here, and then I switch this over to the weekly, what I want to show you is that this is the 50-week simple moving average, aka the bull market support band. Okay, we know the famous Ben Cohen's been talking about this, and he's been right about absolutely everything this cycle. But we have now broke below the 50-week moving averages. Traditionally marks the end of the bull run. However, if we come look, we can see that there has been multiple times that we wicked below it on a weekly candle, multiple times. And so we definitely do not want to get one close. I think Ben says two closes, but at me, this is too close for comfort for me, right? Especially if you break this trend line as well that's sitting around 94 at 95, So overall, the market does not look hot right now, but the sentiment can change so quickly because right here, everyone thought it was over, right? And then not even 2 months later, we're at new all-time high. So sentiment can change very, very quickly, but we are at a low liquidity environment overall, waiting on the Fed to pivot. We're also waiting on the United States of America government shutdown to end. And then, as always in crypto, there's a little bit of FUD, a little bit in drama, and that happens in new emerging markets. But I want to know, what do you think? Do you think the cycle is over? Are we going into a bear market right now? I'm very curious as to what your strategies are. Are you DCAing or are you sitting on your hands waiting for better times? So watch this video above, and if you're not a part of the Finance Freeman family, what are we doing, guys? I love you all.